changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with your daily dose of Chicken Soup for the Soul inspiration. It's Friend Friday, and today we have a very special guest from the Chicken Soup for the Soul family. We're going to be talking to Lee Steinberg, who wrote a story for Chicken Soup for the Soul, Find Your Inner Strength, and has also been a friend of our company in many other ways. And Lee is the guy who was the inspiration for the Jerry Maguire character that you all know from that movie. Now, Lee is a native Californian. He was born and raised in Los Angeles. He is a Berkeley alum for undergraduate and for his law degree, and he is known for having represented many of the most successful athletes and coaches in football, basketball, baseball, hockey, boxing, golf, etc. He actually represented the number one overall pick in the NFL draft for an unprecedented 8 times in conjunction with over 60 first-round picks. And in addition to Jerry Maguire, where he did get a production credit, he's also consulted on other features such as Any Given Sunday, For Love of the Game, and Arliss, that one that is spelled with dollar signs. And he's been on 60 Minutes, Larry King, Fox News, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and many more. He is a really excellent writer who's contributed to Forbes, Huffington Post, Daily Pilot, New York Times, Sporting News, Yahoo Sports, etc. A very talented guy, very plugged into the sports world. And one of his recent books is called The Agent, My 40-Year Career of Making Deals and Changing the Game. So, Lee, welcome to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Chicken Soup does so much for so many people in terms of inspiration.
Yeah, so you wrote a great story. It was actually the winner of the number one spot in our book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Find Your Inner Strength. And I always put my absolute favorite story in that first spot of the 101 stories. And your story was called Spiral. And do you want to talk about that for our listeners?
I had a very charmed life for many, many years. Started out with the first pick in the first round of the NFL draft back in 1975 when there really was no agency concept, and teams would tell players, we don't talk to agents. And it was all underlaid with the concept that athletes could be role models. My dad had 2 core values. One was to treasure relationships, especially family, and the second was to try to make a positive difference in the world and help people who couldn't help themselves. So the athletes went ahead and did 122 scholarship funds at high schools, repaid their college scholarships, and did programs like Work Done's Homes for the Holidays, where he put 145 single mothers and their families into the first home they'll ever own. So trying to use my career to make a difference. In the 2000s, there was a spiral where my father died of cancer. My 2 boys were diagnosed with a disease leading to blindness. We lost a house to the specter of mold, and I got divorced. And I felt powerless, and as if I couldn't protect my family and the people I love from anyone. And I turned to the exact wrong thing to try to salve the pain, to alcohol. And I started to spiral down in 2007, 8, and 9. By 2010, I finally understood that I was in a state of denial, that alcohol had taken over my life, that my one concept was to find more vodka. And at that point, I was sitting on my father's bed. I had lost my relationship with my kids. I'd given away my business. I had shut down my apartment, and I'm sitting at my mom's house. And I had an epiphany, a moment of clarity, that I certainly wasn't living up to my father's values, and my children hadn't asked to be born into this world. And so I went into sober living and joined a 12-step program, found a sponsor with a unique fellowship, and did everything I could to just dedicate my life to 2 concepts. Number 1, I would be sober. And number two, I would be a good father. And nothing else mattered to me. Because without sobriety, nothing else was functionally possible. And I started to refine myself, and my sobriety date is March 21st, 2010, and recently passed my 6th birthday, so I'm now in my 7th year.
That's terrific. And I know that your sports agency is very socially conscious, and you are constantly giving back yourself and having your athletes give back. And you're also a bit of an environmental activist. So can you tell us about some of the cool things you're doing through the power of your agency?
So each athlete picks a different cause they'd like to make a difference in. It can be dyslexia and reading problems under privileged kids. It can be tackling a disease. It can be saving endangered species, and executes a program with the leading business figures, political figures, and community leaders in each of the communities. And so in aggregate, they've raised over $800 million, but more important, consciousness. And athletes can permeate the perceptual screen that especially rebellious adolescents put up against any authority figure. So when the heavyweight champion boxer Lennox Lewis cut a public service announcement that said, "Real men don't hit women," he could do more to tackle attitudes towards domestic violence in young people than 1,000 authority figures. So we fought against domestic violence. We have a large-scale anti-bullying program with the concept that if athletes at the high school level are the purveyors of tolerance instead of being the bullies themselves, they can change the culture and avoid the traumatizing effect that happens to kids who are picked on. In respect to the concept of climate change, we have the Sporting Green Alliance, which takes sustainable technology in wind, solar, recycling, resurfacing, and water as a package to stadium arena and practice fields, college, high school, professional, drop carbon emissions and curb energy costs, and transform them into educational platforms. So the millions of fans that come can see a waterless urinal, a solar panel, and think about how to put that into their own homes and businesses. So our business has morphed into sports-themed motion pictures, television shows, dramatically scripted reality, competition, new apps for the internet, any kind of new technological or content breakthroughs, and actively involved in all of that. And The Agent was a New York Times bestseller, as was Winning with Integrity, and I'm now started on a new book project called The 10 Virtues I Learned from Professional Athletes, or The 10 Truths: courage, loyalty, self-discipline, and doing a series of writing. We're also doing an agent academy, which trains young sports professionals in specific skills. So crisscross the country, trying to form a new generation that will have ethics, ideals, and understand how to recruit, negotiate, brand, market, climb, to do damage control, set up foundations. So it's all with the underlying theme of when you look for someone, as my dad used to tell me, to solve a problem, and you wait for the amorphous they or them to do it, he would tell me, you could wait forever. He'd look at me and say, you're the they, son. The they is you. So it's a sense of individual responsibility that we can, with this practice, make major changes and shifts in some of the problems plaguing the world.
That is great. You know, I think my friend Christina Lurie, who's one of the owners of the Philadelphia Eagles, is doing that environmental thing that you were talking about, right?
Jeffrey Lurie and the Philadelphia Eagles had one of the first environmentally sound stadiums.
Yeah, that's really great. Now, I know you're also working on concussion awareness, and I know it's a bit of a sore, I don't mean to be punny, sore topic in the sports world, but I've been worried about it because my husband loves football so much, and I keep saying to him, are you going to start feeling uncomfortable if you think that these athletes are being injured for your, viewing pleasure? So what's going on now to help fight concussions in football and soccer. My daughter was always heading the ball. Now I feel guilty as a mother that I allowed that to happen. So what's going on, and how can we continue to watch sports and enjoy them and know that our athletes are going to be protected?
The key is to be in solution. So I had a crisis of conscience back in the 1980s when I'd see all of my football players getting hit in the head, and doctors couldn't tell us really what was wrong. So we held a concussion safety conference all the way back in 1994 and pushed a white paper that would take blocking and tackling with the head out of the game, would have neurologists on the sidelines. Not much changed. We did it again with the Concussion Institute, and then the neurologists told us that 3 or more concussions occasion an exponentially higher rate of Alzheimer's, ALS, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and depression. So I called it a ticking time bomb undiagnosed health epidemic. Today we're exploring whether there's helmetry that uses coil and compression to displace the energy flow so it doesn't go all into the head. And remember, this is not simply an NFL problem. It's a college and high school football, hockey, field hockey, AYSO, anything that involves collision with the head. And so I think it's going to, unfortunately, become much more widespread because each time in football, an offensive lineman hits a defensive lineman at the line of scrimmage, it produces a low-level subconcussive event. The player doesn't go out of the game, not knocked out, but at the end of his career, he could have 10,000 of them, which leads to exactly the same concept. So we're looking at a way to practice and have training camp for sport like football without any contact and just save it for the games. Better diagnostic techniques on the sidelines, nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals that can heal the brain. The NFL needs to take the lead. Not enough is being done.
Well, I like that about the helmets, too, where you can actually distribute the impact of the energy in a way that is not as concussive. So is somebody working on helmet technology that athletes will actually accept helmets that they won't believe will impair their performance?
There are new designs out. We sort of have a Oklahoma land rush out there of new ideas and concepts because there's now profit in it, in solving this. It's a worldwide problem. And remember when we talk about this, Amy, it's one thing for an athlete to know from the knocks and pains they had playing a collision game that when they turn 40, they'll have problems reaching over to pick up their child. It's another thing not to be able to identify that child, to lose the concept of memory and judgment. It threatens the very thing that makes us sentient beings as opposed to this desk here.
You know, it's really refreshing to talk to somebody who's right in the middle of sports, tied into the biggest players, the businesses themselves, who is looking at this in such a socially responsible way. So it's really wonderful to hear that you, at the center of it all, are part of looking for the solution so that we can all keep watching these sports and know that our athletes are actually going to be protected. So, Lee, thank you for that. Thanks for your update on everything that you're doing. And I want to thank everyone for listening to us today. I'm Amy Newmark. We talked about the world of athletics today, and if you're thinking about getting more fit yourself, you'll enjoy our next episode when I'm going to share a story that will definitely help you get started, one easy step at a time. And if you want to learn more about Lee Steinberg and all of the great work that he and his partners are doing, go to steinbergsports.com. And if you want to read Lee's story in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Find Your Inner Strength, you can get it on our website, chickensoup.com. Thank you, Lee, for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.